My name is Carol Bennett. I was 67 when my mother leaned across a visitor's table at Cedar Ridge Nursing and Rehabilitation Center and told me I would not be coming home. I had been there 11 days after surgery for a fractured pelvis. My doctor called it short-term rehabilitation. My mother called it where I belonged now. She pushed a cream-colored residency agreement toward me and tapped the signature line. "Dennis moved your things out of the downstairs suite," she said. "He and Paula need the space, and you need professionals." My brother stood behind her holding the brass house key my father had given me. The frayed blue ribbon on its ring swung from one finger. The agreement required a $6,800 community fee and listed Cedar Ridge as my permanent address. My mother said the money had already been transferred from the household account. I did not argue. I asked for a pen, signed only the receipt showing I had received the papers, and folded the unsigned agreement beneath my water cup. 3 weeks later, my mother invited a real estate agent into what she still called her house. She had forgotten one important detail. The house had not belonged to her for 12 years. Stay with me. Proving ownership was easy. Deciding what I owed my mother was not. The role I had always played. In my family, I had always been the person who handled what other people preferred not to see. I balanced the checkbook when my father began mixing up deposits and withdrawals. I scheduled my mother's appointments, compared insurance plans, kept copies of tax notices, and remembered which plumber had replaced the shut-off valve behind the laundry sink. When Dennis called with a problem, I rarely asked how the problem had started. I asked what amount was due and when. That habit began long before any of us became old enough to call it a pattern. Dennis was 7 years younger than I was. He was charming in the way some people are charming because someone else is always cleaning the room after they leave. As a teenager, he could talk my father out of punishment by admitting to half of what he had done and promising twice what he could deliver. My mother called him spirited. When I forgot to bring home a library book, she called me careless. I learned to earn peace by being useful. By 30, I was married to a patient man named Michael and working as a payroll supervisor for the city of Dayton. Numbers made sense to me because they did not change their meaning depending on who was speaking. A deduction was either authorized or it was not. A balance either reconciled or it did not. I liked the clean answer at the bottom of a page. Michael used to tease me about the accordion file I carried to every family meeting. It was dark green, with 12 labeled pockets and a strip of clear tape reinforcing the handle. "Your mother could ask what happened at your third-grade recital," he once said, "and you would produce a receipt." He meant it affectionately. He also understood why I did it. My mother, Evelyn, had a powerful memory for favors she believed she had done and almost no memory for obligations she had accepted. If she gave me a casserole after Michael's surgery, it remained evidence of her devotion for years. If I paid her property taxes, replaced her furnace, and spent 6 weekends repairing water damage, those things became what daughters did. For a long time, I did not consider that unfair. My father, Harold, had worked as a machinist until his hands became too stiff to manage precision tools. My mother had kept the household, raised us, and cared for her own mother during a long decline. I knew what duty looked like in our family. It looked like staying. Then my father died. He suffered a heart attack in the upstairs hallway one February morning. By the time the ambulance arrived, there was nothing anyone could do. My mother was 74. She had never written a check for the mortgage and did not know the house carried more debt than its appearance suggested. My father had refinanced twice. The second loan had paid for Dennis's first construction company after a partner disappeared with customer deposits. There were also unpaid property taxes, a home equity balance, and a lien from a roof contractor my father had been disputing. The total came to just under $138,000. The house was worth about $224,000 then, but my mother could not qualify to refinance on her pension, and Dennis had already declared bankruptcy once. The bank gave her 90 days to cure the delinquency or enter foreclosure proceedings. I remember sitting at her kitchen table with my green accordion file open between us. Snow had gathered along the outside sill. Dennis kept walking to the refrigerator even though he was not hungry. "We can't lose Dad's house," he said. He said it while looking at me. Michael and I had savings, but not enough to hand over $138,000. What we did have was good credit, equity in our smaller home, and the ability to obtain financing. We spoke with a real estate attorney, ordered an appraisal, and arranged a legitimate sale. I purchased the property for $210,000. The proceeds paid the mortgage, taxes, lien, closing costs, and a small remaining amount that went into my mother's account. Michael and I took out a new mortgage in our names. My mother signed a general warranty deed transferring the property to me. The attorney also prepared a lifetime occupancy agreement. It allowed my mother to live in the main part of the house without rent as long as she paid her personal utilities, did not attempt to sell or mortgage the property, and did not allow other adults to establish residence without my written consent. I agreed to pay taxes, insurance, and structural repairs. The agreement was not a trick. It was protection for both of us. My mother could not be removed because of an argument. I could not be exposed to another hidden loan. At the signing, the attorney explained every page. My mother nodded, signed, and then said, "Of course it is still my home." I answered, "It will always be your home." That sentence was emotionally true. Legally, it was not the whole truth, and over the next 12 years my family gradually treated the emotional version as the only one that mattered. Michael and I sold our smaller house and converted the lower level of my mother's property into a private suite. It had a bedroom, bathroom, sitting room, and a side entrance facing the maple tree. We installed a stair lift so my mother could reach me without using the exterior steps. She stayed upstairs among the furniture she had chosen with my father. I stayed below and handled everything else. When Michael died from pancreatic cancer 4 years later, the arrangement became both comfort and trap. My mother was nearby when silence felt unbearable. She brought tea downstairs and sat beside me without requiring conversation. For almost a year, I was grateful for every small sound above my ceiling because it meant I was not entirely alone. Then gratitude hardened into obligation. Dennis's second company failed. He and his wife, Paula, moved into a rental outside Columbus. Their daughter, Rachel, was finishing nursing school. I paid 1 semester of Rachel's tuition after Dennis admitted he had used her college fund to cover payroll. Rachel promised to repay me. I told her to graduate and help someone who needed it. Dennis borrowed $8,000 to replace a truck transmission, $3,200 for back taxes, and $11,500 when a customer sued him over an unfinished deck. Some of it returned in uneven payments. Most did not. My mother never asked him for repayment. She asked me why I was keeping track. "Family isn't a bank," she would say. She was right in one sense. A bank would have stopped lending much earlier. By the time I retired at 65, the mortgage on the house was paid off. I had no children, a modest pension, retirement savings, and the property. I was not wealthy, but I was secure because I had spent 40 years being cautious. That security became visible to my family in ways I did not recognize at first. Dennis began referring to the lower level as the apartment and the upstairs as Mom's place. Paula suggested that the house was too large for 2 women and could eventually be divided into 2 rentals. My mother mentioned that Dennis deserved something from the family property because sons carried on the name. I would remind her gently that the property was not part of her estate. She would wave one hand and say, "Paperwork is paperwork. We all know what your father intended." What my father intended had become a flexible sentence used whenever Dennis needed something. I did not push harder because my mother was in her 80s, because Michael was gone, and because I still confused avoiding conflict with preserving family. The brass key on the blue ribbon hung on a hook beside my downstairs door. My father had given it to me after I bought the house. He had used that key before he died, and I kept the old ribbon even after it frayed. "A house needs somebody who notices things," he had said. For years, I believed noticing was enough. The betrayal they thought I would accept. The fall happened on a Tuesday in late September. I was carrying a laundry basket from the utility room when the edge of my slipper caught beneath the stairlift rail. I twisted, struck the landing, and felt a deep pressure in my left hip that turned sharp when I tried to move. My mother heard me call out and came to the top of the stairs. At 86, she could still move quickly when alarm overrode caution. She called Dennis before she called 911. At the hospital, imaging showed a fractured pelvis. I did not need a hip replacement, but I needed surgery to stabilize the break and several weeks of physical therapy before I could safely manage stairs or bathing alone. The surgeon recommended a skilled nursing rehabilitation facility. Cedar Ridge had a good therapy department and was 10 minutes from the house. Rachel, now a registered nurse at a different hospital, said short-term rehabilitation was common after that kind of injury. 2 or 3 weeks, maybe 4, she told me. Do the work. Don't try to be brave. The pain medication made me foggy, and I was frightened by how quickly my body had become dependent on other people's hands. A nurse helped me sit. An aide helped me wash. A therapist taught me how to move without twisting. I signed admission forms after reading what I could, but the lines blurred. Dennis offered to handle practical matters. "You took care of us for years," he said. "Let me do this." I gave him a limited financial authorization prepared by the hospital's patient services office. It allowed him to pay utilities from the household account for 30 days. It did not permit withdrawals from my retirement accounts, property transactions, or changes of address. My mother took the brass key from the bedside table. "I'll keep this safe," she said. I let her. During the first week at Cedar Ridge, she visited every afternoon. She brought my mail but opened most of it first. She said the envelopes had arrived upstairs and she assumed they concerned household matters. Dennis came twice. Each time carrying a legal pad covered in figures he never showed me clearly. They spoke about my future in vague sentences. "We have to be realistic," my mother said. "The house isn't set up for this," Dennis added. I reminded them that my suite had a walk-in shower, grab bars, and a separate entrance with only 2 steps. Michael and I had added those features for my mother. A temporary ramp could be installed in a day. Dennis looked toward the hallway. "It's not only the steps. You live alone down there. Mom lives upstairs." My mother adjusted the cuff of her blouse. "I can't be responsible for you." I had not asked her to be. The first real warning came from Lena Ortiz, the social worker assigned to my discharge plan. She sat beside my bed with a tablet and asked where I intended to live after rehabilitation. "Home," I said. She hesitated. "Your family indicated the residence may no longer be available." I thought I had misunderstood. Available in what sense? They said the downstairs area is being repurposed and that there may be no safe bedroom for you. I told her I owned the house. She looked at me for a moment, not with disbelief, but with the careful expression professionals use when two versions of a family story have arrived before the truth. Do you have documentation? At home. In a green file. Can someone bring it? I said yes too quickly. When my mother arrived that afternoon, I asked her for the file. Which file? The property file from the locked cabinet in my sitting room. She smiled as if I had requested Christmas decorations in July. Carol, you are supposed to be healing, not burying yourself in old papers. Lena needs proof of residence for discharge planning. There is no discharge plan yet. There will be. My mother placed my mail on the windowsill. The top envelope was from my insurance company and had been opened. Dennis and I have discussed this carefully, she said. Cedar Ridge has long-term rooms. You have no children. You need people around you. The phrase "no children" landed where she intended it to land. I had wanted children. Michael and I had endured 3 miscarriages and 1 unsuccessful adoption process before deciding we could no longer organize our lives around loss. My mother knew that. She also knew that in our family, having no children was treated as evidence that my needs would always be smaller than everyone else's. I am going home, I said. You are not thinking clearly. I am clear enough to know where I live. She stood. We'll talk when Dennis is here. The next morning, a maintenance employee delivered 2 boxes of my belongings to Cedar Ridge. My winter clothes, framed wedding photograph, medications from the bathroom cabinet, and the small ceramic bowl where I kept loose change had been packed in newspaper. My brass key was not in either box. I called Dennis. Why are my things here? We needed to clear the suite. For what? He exhaled into the phone. Paula and I are moving in temporarily. Our landlord is selling the rental. Mom can't be upstairs alone, and you can't be downstairs alone. This solves 2 problems. You moved into my house while I was in rehabilitation. Mom's house, he said automatically. Then he corrected himself. The family house. I asked who had authorized it. Mom did. She cannot authorize anyone to live there. His tone changed from reassuring to impatient. This is exactly why we are worried about you. You are fixating on technicalities instead of what is best for everyone. I hung up before I said something that would be used as proof of instability. That afternoon, Lena helped me review my chart. There was no diagnosis of dementia, no finding that I lacked capacity, and no court order. My physician had recommended continued therapy followed by discharge to a safe residence with outpatient support. Can they keep me here? I asked. Not because your family prefers it, she said. But we need a real discharge plan. Transportation, access, follow-up, care, and confirmation that you can enter the residence. The locked door was becoming their argument. 2 days later, my mother and Dennis arrived together. Paula came with them, carrying a leather folder and a pen. They sat around the visitors' table as though conducting an intervention. My mother wore pearl earrings and the navy jacket she used for church committees. Dennis placed the brass key on the table. The blue ribbon looked darker where his fingers had folded it. Paula opened the folder. Inside was an application for permanent residency at Cedar Ridge, a change of address form, and an authorization for automatic monthly payments from my checking account. The estimated monthly charge was $7,450 after insurance coverage for rehabilitation ended. We found a way to make it work, Paula said. I looked at the amount. With my money. It is your care, my mother replied. And who is paying to live in my house? Dennis leaned back. We will cover groceries and help Mom. That has value. What happened to your rental? It is complicated. Paula's eyes moved toward him. That small glance told me the landlord's story was incomplete. My mother pushed the residency agreement closer. Sign it, Carol. Stop making this ugly. I read the first page. It described Cedar Ridge as my permanent residence and authorized the facility to coordinate financial matters through Dennis as my responsible representative. I turned to the signature page, then to the separate receipt acknowledging delivery of the documents. I signed the receipt only. My mother saw the pen move and relaxed. Dennis picked up the packet without checking the page. Good, he said. This is the sensible choice. I slid the unsigned agreement back beneath my water cup. Leave the key. My mother closed her hand around it. You do not need it here. That was the moment I understood that they did not believe they were asking me to accept a plan. They believed the decision had already been made. The details that didn't make sense. When people lie badly, they often depend on emotion to keep you from examining the structure of the lie. My mother wanted me ashamed of needing help. Dennis wanted me guilty about leaving her alone. Paula wanted me overwhelmed by forms, fees, and medical language. If I remained frightened enough, the details would not have to make sense. But details were where I had lived my entire working life. The first detail was the rental. Dennis had said his landlord was selling the house and that he and Paula needed temporary accommodation. Rachel told me something different when she visited Cedar Ridge the following Saturday. She arrived in hospital scrubs after a night shift, carrying coffee and a grocery store muffin. She looked tired before I asked anything. Did your parents lose their rental? I said. Rachel stared at the lid of her coffee. Dad said the lease ended. That was not my question. She rubbed one thumb along the cardboard sleeve. They were behind. 4 months, I think. The landlord filed for eviction. How much? Around $9,000. Maybe more with fees. I waited. Rachel added, Dad thought he could fix it after the next job paid. The job did not pay. That was familiar. What was new was the timing. Dennis and Paula had known for weeks that they might be removed from the rental. My fall had not created their housing problem. It had created an opportunity. The second detail was the household account. My mother had said the $6,800 Cedar Ridge community fee had already been transferred. Lena checked with the billing office. No community fee had been paid because I had not signed the permanent residency agreement. I called the bank using the number printed on an old statement Lena helped me retrieve from my email. The household account was in my name, with Dennis as a temporary authorized signer under the limited document from the hospital. The representative confirmed 3 unusual transactions: a $6,800 cashier's check payable to a company called Bennett Residential Solutions, a $2,400 payment to a storage facility, and a $1,175 purchase at a home improvement store. Bennett Residential Solutions was Dennis's newest company. I asked the bank to freeze further withdrawals and revoke his signer authority. The representative required identity verification and a signed form. Lena arranged for the facility notary, and the restriction was placed that afternoon. The $6,800 had not been paid to Cedar Ridge. It had been moved into Dennis's business account under a description designed to sound connected to my care. What did that prove? It proved misuse of the limited authority. It did not yet prove the full purpose of removing me from the house. The third detail came from my neighbor, Audrey Collins. Audrey had lived across the street for 22 years. She was 71, widowed, and observant in a way my mother considered nosy when the observation was inconvenient. She called after receiving my number from Rachel. "Are you all right?" she asked. "I am improving." "Why?" "Because Evelyn told the garden club you had been moved permanently." I looked toward the closed door of my room. "What else did she say?" "That the downstairs would be renovated for Dennis and Paula. And that the house might finally be sold next spring. Because you had agreed it was too much to maintain." "Did she say who owned it?" Audrey gave a short, humorless laugh. "Your mother has never said anyone owns that house except your mother." She then told me about the man with the camera. 2 days earlier, a real estate agent had walked through the property taking photographs. He had measured the front rooms, inspected the basement windows, and placed a small electronic lockbox on the side railing. No sign was posted, but Audrey had asked him whether the house was being listed. He said he was preparing a market analysis for the owner. "Did you get his name?" I asked. "Of course I did. His card is on my refrigerator." His name was Martin Hale, with Hale and Cooper Realty. I called from Cedar Ridge. I told him my name and the property address. There was a pause long enough to reveal that he recognized both. "Mrs. Bennett," he said carefully. "I was under the impression the property belonged to Evelyn Bennett." "Did you check the county record?" "We have not entered a listing agreement." I was asked to prepare a comparative market analysis. "By whom?" "Your mother and a man identifying himself as her son." "I am her daughter. I am also the recorded owner." Another pause. Martin apologized and said he would verify title before taking any further step. He could not discuss private communications with prospective clients, but he confirmed that the estimated market value was between $410,000 and $435,000 because of redevelopment nearby. That number explained urgency. My mother knew the house had increased in value, but I doubted she understood how much. Dennis did. A property worth over $400,000 with no mortgage looked to him like a solution large enough to erase every smaller failure. The fourth detail was hidden in my mail. My mother had been opening it, but she had not understood which envelopes mattered. A letter from Montgomery County's property tax office arrived at Cedar Ridge after I changed my mailing address back through the bank. It confirmed an online request for a duplicate tax bill and a change in the contact email associated with the parcel. The request had been submitted using my name and Dennis's email address. A duplicate tax bill could be innocent. It could also be used to make someone appear familiar with a property during a loan application or proposed sale. I called the county office, corrected the email, and added a verbal security note. Then I contacted the attorney who had handled the original purchase 12 years earlier. Her name was Margaret Ellis. She was semi-retired but still kept archived files. When I explained the situation, she did not react dramatically. "Do you have your copy of the deed and occupancy agreement?" she asked. "They are in a locked cabinet in my suite. My family will not bring them. The deed is public record. I can obtain a certified copy. The agreement is in my archived file." "Can my mother sell the house?" "No. She cannot convey property she does not own. She can create confusion, expense, and possibly liability, but she cannot deliver valid title." "Can she let Dennis move in?" "Not under the agreement. You gave her a personal right of occupancy, not authority to admit additional residents." I closed my eyes. I do not want to throw my 86-year-old mother out of her home. "Then do not begin there," Margaret said. Begin by deciding what outcome you can live with. That sentence stayed with me. Until then, I had been waiting for someone to tell me what I was permitted to do. The facility could tell me I had discharge rights. The bank could stop withdrawals. The county could protect the parcel record. The attorney could explain ownership. None of them could decide what kind of daughter I would be after learning what my mother had done. The fifth detail came from Paula, though she did not intend to give it to me. She called the evening after the bank froze the account. Did you block Dennis's card? I revoked temporary authority that was being misused. We bought materials for the downstairs bathroom. Without my permission. Your shower is old, Carol. We were improving it. For me? She did not answer. I asked about the $6,800 cashier's check. That was reimbursement, she said. For what? For managing everything. Moving, storage, time off work, meeting with the facility. Who approved a management fee? Her voice became sharp. You have no idea what this has cost us. That was true. I did not yet know the full cost because I did not know the full plan. Then Paula said, Dennis already has a lender looking at the property. You cannot freeze everything because you are angry. She stopped speaking as soon as the words left her mouth. What lender? I asked. I misspoke. What lender, Paula? She hung up. I wrote the date and time in a notebook Lena had given me. A real estate agent had been inside the house. Someone had requested tax records in my name. Dennis had transferred money into his business. Paula had mentioned a lender. These were not separate acts of panic. They were parts of a plan built around one assumption, that if I remained at Cedar Ridge long enough, my absence would begin to look like consent. The truth I could no longer ignore. For most of my life, I had treated my mother's favoritism as a personality difference rather than a moral choice. She worried about Dennis because he was impulsive. She relied on me because I was capable. She excused him because he was fragile beneath the charm. She demanded more from me because she knew I could handle it. Those explanations had protected me from a harder conclusion. My mother did not merely believe Dennis needed more help. She believed my stability belonged to the family and his instability entitled him to it. Rachel helped me see the rest. She came to Cedar Ridge on her day off with a manila envelope tucked inside her tote bag. She closed the room door before sitting down. I need to tell you something, she said. Her face had the exhausted seriousness of a nurse about to deliver news she wished belonged to someone else. 2 months before my fall, Dennis had approached a private lender who financed short-term real estate projects. He wanted $175,000 to restart his contracting business, pay tax debt, and purchase 2 distressed houses. Traditional banks had rejected him because of his credit history. The lender was willing to consider a loan secured by property with sufficient equity. Dennis had no property. My mother told him he could use the family house. Did she know she did not own it? I asked. Rachel looked down. Dad said Grandma told him the deed had only been put in your name to get through the foreclosure. She said it was understood that it still belonged to her. Were you there? For part of it. They were at Mom and Dad's rental. Grandma said you would never refuse if the money kept Dad working. Then Dad said you had become controlling since Uncle Michael died. I felt the old urge to defend myself, even in a room where no accusation required an answer. Rachel continued. The private lender's preliminary title search had identified me as owner. Dennis could not pledge the house without my participation. He and my mother discussed asking me to sign a limited guarantee. Then I fell. At the hospital, While I was medicated and frightened, Dennis had presented the situation as a housing emergency rather than a loan problem. When I went to rehabilitation, he moved into the house. He believed that establishing residence, controlling the mail, and becoming my financial representative would make it easier to persuade me to sign later. The permanent nursing home application served two purposes. It removed me physically, and it created a paper trail suggesting that I had voluntarily changed my residence. "How do you know all of this?" I asked. Rachel placed the envelope on my blanket. Inside were printed text messages from a family group conversation that did not include me. Rachel had taken screenshots before leaving the group. One message from Dennis read, "Once she is settled, she will stop fighting. She hates scenes." My mother had replied, "She needs to understand the house cannot sit there for one person downstairs." Paula wrote, "The lender wants proof Mom has authority or Carol is permanently out." My mother answered, "Leave Carol to me." The sentence did not sound dramatic. That made it worse. There were also photographs of the lower-level suite after my belongings had been removed. Dennis's drafting table stood where Michael's reading chair had been. Boxes of business records filled my bedroom. My wedding photograph had been placed face down in one of the storage bins. Rachel began crying before I did. "I should have told you earlier." "Why didn't you?" "Because Dad said if the loan failed, they would lose everything. He said you had more than you needed." "Grandma said you would forgive us because you always do." There it was. Not hatred. Not even greed in its simplest form. Expectation. They had built the entire plan on my history of absorbing harm and then returning to the table. I asked Rachel why she had changed her mind. She told me about the permanent residency agreement. Paula had celebrated after leaving Cedar Ridge because she thought I had signed it. Dennis planned to show it to the lender as evidence that I no longer occupied the property and that he was managing my affairs. Rachel had asked to see the signature page. Paula sent her a photograph. The only signature was on the receipt. "Dad said they could get the rest later," Rachel whispered. "He said if you resisted, Grandma could tell people you were confused after surgery." My fear changed shape. Until that moment, I had been afraid of losing my home. Now I was afraid of what they were willing to say about my mind in order to obtain it. I called Lena and asked for a formal capacity evaluation to be added to my chart. My physician examined me, reviewed my medications, and documented that I was alert, oriented, able to understand financial and medical decisions, and capable of directing my discharge. That evaluation did not prove my family had lied. It did something equally important. It removed one of the tools they hoped to use. Margaret obtained a certified deed, the original occupancy agreement, and the closing statement from 12 years earlier. She also requested a title report confirming that the property was free of mortgages and that I was the sole fee owner. When she visited Cedar Ridge, she carried everything in a new green accordion file because I had told her about the one locked in my suite. She laid the papers across the visitor's table. The deed contained my mother's signature in blue ink. The closing statement showed the debts paid from the sale proceeds. The occupancy agreement stated that her right to live in the property was personal, non-transferable, and conditioned on compliance. Section 7 addressed additional occupants. Section 9 prohibited any representation that she had authority to sell, mortgage, or pledge the property. Section 11 allowed me to terminate the agreement after written notice and an opportunity to cure a material breach. I read that section twice. "How much notice?" I asked. 60 days under this agreement, Margaret said. Longer may be advisable given her age and local housing law. Can I remove Dennis immediately? He has no right under the agreement. But because he is physically occupying the property, we should follow formal notice procedures rather than create a confrontation. I looked at the deed. For 12 years, it had represented the day I saved my mother's home. Now it represented something else, the limit she had assumed I would never enforce. Margaret asked what I wanted. My first answer was that I wanted everything returned to the way it had been before the fall. Then I pictured my wedding photograph face down in a storage bin. I pictured my mother tapping the nursing home signature line. I read the message, "Leave Carol to me." There was no before to return to. There was only a pattern I had finally seen clearly. Still, I did not want revenge. I did not want my mother homeless. I did not want Rachel punished for telling the truth. I did not even want Dennis ruined, though I no longer intended to rescue him. I wanted separation between care and control. So I designed a fair offer. My mother could remain in the upstairs portion of the house for 6 months while choosing among 3 options. Move to a smaller apartment she could afford with her pension, move in with Dennis and Paula, or enter an assisted living community near Rachel. I would pay moving expenses up to $5,000 and cover the first 3 months of rent or assisted living fees. Dennis and Paula would leave within 30 days. The $6,800 transferred to Dennis's company would be repaid under a signed schedule. They would return my belongings, keys, mail, and access codes. They would confirm in writing that they had no ownership interest in the property and would stop using it in any loan application. In exchange, I would not pursue immediate civil action over the unauthorized withdrawal, and I would allow my mother enough time to relocate with dignity. Margaret called the proposal generous. I called it the last version of myself I was willing to offer them. The line I finally drew. We held the meeting at Cedar Ridge because I was still completing therapy and because Lena had offered to sit nearby if I needed help ending it. My mother arrived first. Dennis and Paula followed. Rachel came separately and sat beside the window. Dennis looked at the green accordion file on the table. "What is this?" "The paperwork you kept telling me did not matter." My mother glanced at Rachel, then at me. "Why is she here?" "Because she is part of this family and because she told me the truth." Dennis turned toward his daughter. "What did you do?" Rachel's voice was quiet. "I stopped helping you lie." Paula began to speak, but I raised one hand. I did not shout. I had spent too many years imagining that strength had to sound like anger. That day, strength sounded like reading one page at a time. I explained that Cedar Ridge was a rehabilitation facility, not my permanent residence. I had not signed the residency agreement. My physician had documented my capacity. The bank had revoked Dennis's authority. The county had corrected the parcel information. The real estate agent had been notified that neither my mother nor Dennis owned the property. Then I placed the certified deed on the table. My mother did not look at it. "We know about the deed," she said. "That was arranged for financing." Margaret, who had joined by speakerphone, answered calmly. "It was a sale." Evelyn received the benefit of the proceeds. The deed transferred ownership without reservation. My mother stared at the phone. "This is a family matter." "It is also a property matter," Margaret said. I read the fair offer aloud. 6 months for my mother. 30 days for Dennis and Paula. Moving assistance. No immediate lawsuit if the money was repaid and the property was removed from every financing discussion. When I finished, Dennis laughed once. "You expect Mom to leave her own house?" "I expect everyone to acknowledge whose house it is. Dad bought that house. Dad borrowed against it. I bought it from Mom, paid the debts, and paid the mortgage for 12 years. My mother finally looked at the deed. You would not have that house if I had not raised you. The sentence was so perfectly shaped to reach my oldest weakness that I almost admired it. That is true, I said. And Dennis would not have had several businesses, trucks, lawyers, and second chances if this family had not helped him. Raising a child is not a mortgage against everything the child later earns. Paula folded her arms. Where are we supposed to go in 30 days? Where were you planning to go before I fell? We are trying to rebuild. You are trying to rebuild with property you do not own. Dennis leaned toward me. The lender is ready. One signature from you, and everyone is safe. We can pay you. Interest. Mom stays. You can stay at Cedar Ridge until you are stronger. This is not robbery. It is an opportunity. For a moment, I understood why my mother believed him. He made extraction sound like cooperation. He made my refusal sound like the only destructive act in the room. What happens if the projects fail? I asked. They will not. What happens if they do? The houses can be sold. And if they cannot? He looked away. The answer was the family house. My house. I pointed to the repayment schedule. This offer expires Friday at 5. If you accept it, we handle the transition privately. If you reject it, Margaret will serve formal notices, the bank will investigate the unauthorized withdrawal, and the lender will receive certified proof that you have no authority. My mother pushed the papers back. I am not being evicted by my own daughter. You are being given 6 months and help relocating because you tried to make my temporary rehabilitation permanent. I did what was best for you. Then why did Dennis need a loan against the house? She did not answer. Not one explanation. Not one apology. Not one acknowledgement that she had used my injury as leverage. Instead, she said, if you force this, you will lose your family. The threat would once have worked because I believed family was something other people could revoke. I may lose the version that required me to surrender, I said. I am already grieving that version. Dennis stood so quickly his chair scraped the floor. Come on, he told Paula. My mother remained seated. For one hopeful second, I thought she might sign. She reached across the table and picked up the brass key, which Dennis had placed beside the folder. This key was your father's, she said. He gave it to me. Because he trusted you to protect the family. I held out my hand. I am protecting what he left us from becoming another loan Dennis cannot repay. Her fingers tightened around the blue ribbon. Then Rachel said, Grandma, give her the key. My mother looked at her granddaughter with an expression I had seen directed at me for decades, disappointment. Used as discipline. Rachel did not look away. Slowly, my mother set the key in my palm. The ribbon was warm from her hand. She did not accept the offer by Friday. Neither did Dennis. At 5:12, Margaret emailed formal notices. The line was drawn. What happened after that was not quick, clean, or painless. Boundaries rarely are when people have built their lives around your lack of them. The day everything changed. By the time I was ready for discharge, Dennis had changed the side door lock. He claimed the old lock had jammed. Audrey had photographs of a locksmith's van outside the house 2 days after our meeting. Margaret sent a written demand for access and arranged for a deputy to accompany me during the return, not to arrest anyone, but to prevent a confrontation and confirm possession. I did not arrive dramatically. I arrived in Lena's car with a walker, a plastic bag of medications, and the green accordion file on my lap. The maple leaves had begun turning yellow. My lower-level curtains were gone. A new keypad had been installed. The side door. Dennis opened it before we knocked. He looked tired. The confidence he wore at Cedar Ridge had thinned. Behind him, my sitting room had become an office. 2 folding tables held plans, invoices, and boxes of power tools. Paula stood near the bathroom with her phone raised, recording. My mother remained upstairs. Margaret's associate handed Dennis the notice confirming that his permission to occupy the property had been revoked and that he had until the court-approved date to remove his belongings. Because he had refused the private 30-day agreement, the process had become formal. "You brought law enforcement to Mom's house," he said. The deputy replied before I could. "This is a civil standby. We are here to keep the peace." I entered my own suite. The ceramic bowl was missing. Michael's reading chair had been moved into the garage. My clothes remained at the storage facility Dennis had paid with my account. The bathroom tile had been torn out and left unfinished because the home improvement purchase had covered only part of the materials. On the bedroom wall, Dennis had taped a large plan showing 2 rental units and an exterior staircase. He had drawn through the maple tree. "You were remodeling the entire property," I said. "Improving it." "With whose approval?" "We were going to discuss it after the loan." The loan had not merely been intended to restart his business. The house itself was the first project. I asked for my mail, documents, and key codes. Paula pointed to 3 grocery bags near the door. "Everything is there." It was not. The locked cabinet containing my original files had been pried open. The green property file was gone. Dennis claimed he had never seen it. That lie no longer frightened me because I held certified copies, and Margaret held the archived originals. The missing file was evidence of their conduct, not control over my future. Upstairs, my mother sat in my father's recliner with the television muted. She had packed nothing. "You embarrassed us," she said. I came home. The neighbors watched a police car pull up. Audrey watched an agent photograph a house you did not own. "You did not mind being watched then." She looked smaller than she had at Cedar Ridge. Age had returned to her face now that authority was no longer carrying it. I explained that the 6-month offer remained available for another 48 hours if she signed the acknowledgement and cooperated with the transition. Margaret had extended it once because I asked. My mother turned the television volume up. "Dennis will fix this." He tried. The private lender scheduled a final meeting the following week because Dennis had insisted there was a misunderstanding in the title record. He told the lender that I held title only as nominee for my mother and that a family trust agreement would prove her beneficial ownership. No such trust existed. Margaret advised me not to attend unless invited. The lender's attorney contacted her directly after receiving the certified deed and occupancy agreement. He requested confirmation that I had not authorized a mortgage, guarantee, or sale. I signed an affidavit stating exactly that. The financing was denied. That should have ended it. Instead, Dennis made one final attempt to turn pressure into permission. He invited my mother, Paula, Rachel, and me to a meeting at the office of Hale and Cooper Realty. He said a buyer was prepared to offer $425,000 in cash, enough to settle everyone's problems. Martin Hale had refused to list the property without me, but Dennis had found an investor interested in a direct purchase. I attended with Margaret because I wanted the story spoken in front of neutral witnesses. The conference room had a glass wall and a table too polished for the papers spread across it. Dennis had prepared a distribution sheet. From the proposed $425,000 sale, he planned to pay $38,000 in business and tax debt, $9,000 in rent arrears, $15,000 toward a new vehicle, and $40,000 for my mother's assisted living reserve. He allocated $25,000 to me for relocation and listed the remaining amount as investment capital for Bennett Residential Solutions. He had assigned me less than 6% of the sale price of my own property. You would still have your pension, he said, as though presenting generosity. Margaret asked, on what basis are you allocating the seller's proceeds? Dennis pointed toward my mother. The property is morally hers. Martin Hale sat at the far end of the table. He looked deeply uncomfortable. My mother spoke next. Carol, take the $25,000. You do not need a whole house anymore. Cedar Ridge knows you. You could be safe there. The opening scene returned with such clarity that I could see the water cup over the unsigned agreement. She still believed the nursing home was the solution because it moved me out of the path of everyone else's plans. I opened the green accordion file and removed 4 documents. The certified deed. The closing statement showing the $210,000 purchase. The paid-off mortgage release in my name. The title report confirming sole ownership. I placed them in front of Martin and the investor's attorney. I am not selling, I said. Dennis looked at my mother. Tell her. My mother stared at the deed as if it had been written that morning instead of signed by her 12 years earlier. I did not understand what I was signing, she said. Margaret slid forward the attorney's original certification from the closing file. It stated that the terms had been explained, that my mother had independent opportunity to seek counsel, and that she had signed voluntarily. There was also a letter from her own legal aid attorney at the time approving the arrangement as preferable to foreclosure. My mother had understood. She had simply spent 12 years believing my love would cancel the document whenever she wished. The investor's attorney closed his folder. There is no transaction without Ms. Bennett's consent. Martin removed the proposed market analysis from the table. Dennis's distribution sheet remained between us, every imagined dollar depending on the person he had tried to confine. That was the day everything changed, though not because anyone apologized. The change was simpler. For the first time, my no remained in the room after everyone had tried to talk over it. What remained afterward? Dennis and Paula left the house 7 weeks later under a negotiated move-out order. They removed their furniture and tools but left the unfinished bathroom, damaged cabinet, and several unpaid utility bills. The bank recovered $4,300 of the $6,800 transfer from Dennis's business account. He signed a repayment agreement for the remainder after Margaret informed him that I was prepared to pursue the matter formally. He made 3 payments, missed 2, and resumed after receiving a demand letter. I did not lend him money to make the payments. That sentence may sound ordinary. For me, it represented a new life. My mother stayed for 5 months. She never signed the acknowledgement, but after the financing meeting she stopped claiming she could sell the house. Rachel helped her tour apartments and assisted living communities. In the end, she chose a small senior apartment near Rachel's hospital because it had a balcony and allowed her to keep her dining room table. I paid the movers and 3 months of rent, as I had offered. Dennis accused me of rewarding her after what she had done. He misunderstood the purpose. I was not erasing consequences. I was choosing a consequence I could live with. My mother and I did not reconcile in the way families do at the end of comforting stories. For several months, she spoke to me only through Rachel. When she finally called, she asked whether I had found the silver serving tray she believed the movers had misplaced. She did not ask about my therapy or the house. I found the tray in a box labeled winter linens and delivered it to her apartment. She made tea. We sat across from each other at the small table. Your father would hate this, she said. He would hate what happened. He wanted Dennis protected. He wanted all of us protected. She looked toward the balcony. You always had more sense than your brother. It was the closest she came to explaining herself. I said, having more sense did not mean I needed less care. She pressed her lips together. I did not fill the silence for her. That was another new thing. Rachel and I grew closer, though trust returned slowly. She had told the truth, but she had also waited until the plan became dangerous. She understood that. We did not pretend one brave act erased every earlier silence. She helped me choose new bathroom tile and installed a medication reminder on my phone. I paid her for the work she did on the house. When she protested, I told her family could be generous without making labor invisible. I completed physical therapy 4 months after the fall. The first time I walked from the side door to the maple tree. Without a cane, I stood there longer than necessary. Dennis's renovation plan had marked the tree for removal. I hired an arborist instead. He trimmed 2 damaged branches and said the tree could live another 20 years. I kept the house. Not because a 67-year-old woman needs every room, and not because property is more important than people. I kept it because decisions about my life needed to begin with my consent. A smaller home may make sense someday. Assisted living may make sense someday. Help may become necessary. But help offered without consent can become control, and control disguised as concern is still control. The green accordion file now sits in a fireproof cabinet. The certified deed is inside, along with the occupancy agreement, repayment records, repair invoices, and the unsigned Cedar Ridge residency form. I kept that form because it reminds me how close I came to accepting a future someone else had arranged around my silence. The brass key hangs beside my downstairs door again. I replaced the frayed blue ribbon with a new one, but I folded the old ribbon into the property file instead of throwing it away. My father had told me a house needed somebody who noticed things. He was right, but I understand the sentence differently now. It is not enough to notice the leaking pipe, the unpaid tax, the frightened parent, or the brother who keeps failing. You also have to notice when your usefulness has become the reason other people believe they own your choices. My mother did not forget my name. She did not forget that I had paid the bills or saved the property. She forgot something more convenient, that love did not transfer ownership back to her, and sacrifice did not make me permanently available for use. I still visit her twice a month. Some visits are warm. Some are careful. Dennis and I speak only when necessary, and the damaged relationship may remain damaged. I grieve that, but grief is not proof that a boundary was wrong. Sometimes the price of keeping a family together is paid entirely by the person least willing to let it break. Once that person stops paying, everyone calls the result cruelty. I no longer do. I call it an honest accounting. When a parent uses concern to take control of an adult child's home, money, or future, where should compassion end? And self-protection begin?